This day, 2 decades ago, the world's largest country ceased to exist. The fall of the Soviet Union meant the end of the Cold War and the birth of a dozen new states. But 20 years on, the collapse of the USSR raises unanswered questions, as Ekaterina Gracheva explains.
Even today, many generate their own explanations for the fall of a global Goliath, with some putting it down to the role of just a few.
I'll give you 2 reasons. Gorbachev and Yeltsin.
The 1991 August coup was a turning point in the country's history, with images of Yeltsin standing on a tank, creating a new hero. Yet for most here, even that wasn't seen as causing a fatal crack in the Soviet Union.
It was all very sudden and shocking. I mean, there were people, even months before, who were assuring us that this was going to go on forever. So, I mean, all the billions and billions and billions that the US had put into intelligence and forecasting all proved to be completely useless.
The collapse of the Soviet Union was not so much a revolution. Rather, it was a peaceful divorce of former republics longing for independence. But the breakup led to long-lasting and painful consequences.
The collapse of the Soviet Union is the biggest geopolitical disaster of the 20th century.
And in that assessment, Vladimir Putin is not alone. Although many Russians began enjoying freedoms never imagined in the USSR, 60% still believe the collapse did more harm than good.
20 years on, Russians still seem undecided over how to treat the legacy of the USSR. In Moscow, most Soviet names have long been erased from the streets and people's memories. But some symbols of the past stand out so vividly it can feel like those 2 decades never happened. This monument, Worker and Kolkhoznica, took 6 years and $30 million to restore. Not even the government would consider taking down what is among the most famous unofficial symbols of the USSR.
A strong worker and a portly collective farmer were a symbol of prosperity and stability. In a country with a planned economy, everyone knew they would be provided with their metaphorical hammer and sickle and knew exactly how much to produce with them. 1991 changed all that. The post-Soviet economies were shattered. Their deficits skyrocketed, production plunged, and it took them years to get back on their feet.
In the last years of the Soviet Union, there was that possibility before the Soviet Union to continue with an authoritarian political regime, but to liberalize the economy and the market in the same way as the Chinese did.
But among the political elite, many didn't want to support the drive to modernize and in turn save the Union. Instead, they wanted to destroy it. And during that descent, many republics were plunged into ethnic violence after gaining independence.
When it was clear the Union was falling apart, it seems, national minorities started dragging the blanket to their side. It was at that time that Georgia forcefully included South Ossetia and Abkhazia into its territories.
Similar ethnic clashes between Armenia and Azerbaijan claimed the lives of over 30,000 people. 1,000 people were killed in the Transnistria conflict. Russia remains on a peacekeeping mission there. At least 1,000 people were killed in a post-breakup clashes between Georgia and South Ossetia, and over 100,000 were displaced. In Tajikistan, the consequences were the worst. 60,000 killed and over 1 million people displaced. Even Moscow itself didn't feel secure. After the fall of the Berlin Wall, the world breathed a sigh of relief. But it didn't last long when NATO set about creating a new wall made of missiles. The alliance steadily moved towards Russia, incorporating former Soviet republics but leaving Moscow out of Europe's new security framework.
The West broke a number of promises to Russia. I think Russia could have expected that there wouldn't have been NATO expansion, that Russia itself would perhaps even join NATO or become part of a new system of European collective security.
The fall of the USSR put an end to the Cold War era forever, a fundamental shift in global geopolitics, with just a few now calling the shots. And without a powerful counterweight, today's world remains far from secure. Ekaterina Gracheva.